Can you believe this is still happening right now in the 2000s and whatevers? We're still doing this? Okay, so I'm going to be talking about American Indian children's literature during this lecture. So come on along with me. You might recall that we talked about cultural assimilation, and it was directly connected to the rainbow fish that I was referring to, this whole idea of assimilating, becoming like the dominant culture, or being forced to become like the dominant culture to be accepted in our society, right? Well, assimilation was a big part of the early history of American Indians, specifically the early history of American Indians when white dominant culture came from across the ocean, right, to settle into somebody else's land. This is the culture I'm talking about. So what happened was they got this idea that American Indians were kind of savage beasts, right? And that they needed to be rescued from themselves. They needed to become more white, actually. So what happened? A huge campaign in the early, 1790 to 1920. So a long time of trying to turn American Indians into the dominant culture ideal. So what happened is that children were literally taken from their homes and brought into boarding schools because the dominant culture thought that was best for them, and started teaching them how to be more white. So by the end of this whole boarding school debacle, we have learned that many children were, in fact, killed or died because of abject conditions and this whole deal of trying to turn American Indians into Anglo citizens, right? And so there's all sorts of reasons this happened, right? There's racism reasons, for sure. But there's also the whole idea that they really targeted tribes that were very strong, and that they were trying to steal their land, right? So there was some political and strategical reasons to try to think that the magnanimous, benevolent, wonderful, kind white people were trying to save the American Indian from themselves by taking them into these boarding schools, teaching them skills. It was like vocational skills, teaching them how to do all this stuff. It was for them. Yeah, it wasn't for them. So let's add that to everything else we did to the American Indians when the dominant culture came and settled on stolen land. Let's look at some of the reasons why, when we see this culture, and specifically in the reflection of early children's books, that it was pretty scattered, and there's lots of reasons for it, right? There's lots of reasons because of the oppression that happened 1,000,000 years ago. Well, really not that long, still is here, right? It still is reverberating, just like when we talked about the Black and African American children's literature and the specific culture, how it's still reverberating, like that word, had to say it twice, with the impact of racism and what the dominant culture did, in fact, do to them, to steal land, specifically for the American Indians. And there's a famous example of that. And if you grew up in the United States and learned some of this history, when I was learning this history about Christopher Columbus, it was a very positive take on a very horrific man, right? That he supposedly came over to America, discovered America. Hello, it was already discovered. And brought all this fabulous stuff and named the Indians because he thought he was in West Indies, because although he was purported to be this fabulous navigator, he kind of ended up in the wrong spot, right? He was looking for gold for Spain. And so he got this fleet of ships. well, I guess 3 is a fleet, right? And set out west. I don't know if he sailed west. Set out to sail and discover America, right? And grab the gold and bring it back to his queen. So that was a very famous story when I was growing up, and it's still, hey, hello, Christopher Columbus Day. Hello? Yeah. Official holiday? Yeah, we've kind of, some states have changed it to the Indigenous Peoples Day. Doesn't really resonate, hasn't really caught on the way it should. But so this is was a pretty important guy in the history of the United States. And so again, we have this individual sent out to steal gold from other countries by his country, and he ends up in the wrong place and is still a hero, but he couldn't find gold. So look at what he did instead. He enslaved all of these Indians, American Indians. He enslaved tons of Indians because he couldn't find gold. So he took the next best thing and actually took them back to Spain because he didn't have anything else to offer. He started a huge slavery trade. A slavery trade that we never, ever look at when we look at Christopher Columbus. Perhaps now, maybe some of you learned a little bit about how horrid he was, right? So this awful person in the name of the king and queen of Spain sought out to seek new lands and pillage them. And indeed he did. This is from his journal. The Indians are so naive and so free with their possessions that no one who has not witnessed them would believe it. When you ask for something they have, they never say no. To the contrary, they offer to share with anyone. They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. So a wonderful slave trade going the other way. 1492, Columbus sailed the oceans blue. Look at some of the links, video links I put in, because you'll note some of the propaganda that was enfolded around this non-hero. So coming up in terms of politically correct ways to address a culture, in the 1970s, people began promoting the word Native Americans as being correct instead of saying Indians. That Indians was debasing, and so some people felt Native Americans more accurate, less racist. But Native Americans weren't necessarily in agreement with this, right? It's like it's a term ascribed by the culture that took their land. So what they say is if you can't be tribe specific, which is the most important thing, right now, currently what I'm using is American Indian or Native. So supposedly by using those terms, you're being more respectful. It's hard to find the correct information for me as a white person, what terms I should use. I did have the opportunity to talk personally with Dr. Hay when I was in Alaska a couple years ago, and she suggested that if you can't be tribe specific, that you should use American Indian capitalized, because then it becomes a proper noun and it's referring to a specific group. So the use of capital letters is grammatically correct, but it also conveys respect. And this was something that was interesting in Australia not that long ago, where they started capitalizing the term Aborigines along the same kind of vein. Of course, it's important if we can be tribe specific, but when I was growing up, we didn't even talk about specific tribes, specific American Indian tribes. And there's a ton of them. And it would seem that locally, you're taught locally, you could learn the local tribes, right? So in California, there's 1 million tribes, but we could have learned about, when my kids were growing up in Sacramento, they could have learned about the Sierra Miwok and the Wahoo, right? That those were really specific to the Sacramento area, but it didn't happen. So tri-specific would be the way to go, but at least something more respectful like American Indian and Natives. And it might change, and then we change with it, because the culture that designates the title should have the authority as to what we are to call other people, other citizens. So, well, we got a long history of objectifying American Indians, started by stealing their land, objectifying them so that we could steal their land, right? And then putting them off into different things, and over sexualizing American Indian women, and objectifying them in terms of all sorts of things, right? And it, of course, Disney, once again, is always great when we look at racism and sexist examples. And Peter Pan was and is a popular movie that really does a number on American Indians. So do look at that short video that kind of talks about it. It's like, the question is, what makes the red man red? Well, wait till you hear the answer they have. So another way that we've stereotyped American Indians is so interesting, I think. I love this bit of history because it's incredible. So way back when, there was this guy named Buffalo Bill, and he had a Wild West show, right? And he went all over the United States and all over parts of Europe to display his Wild West show. I mean, that was way before anything, right? TV, movies, the internet. So it was a big deal. But the problem was, what he did is he did a perfect number here of stereotyping American Indians that still lives on today. Is that he took the Lakota tribe, or I don't think he took them, but he bribed the Lakota tribe to come with him on his Wild West show, because look at, they're fabulous, right? They're I don't even know if I should say native outfits. It's a splendid and a beautiful sight, right? So what we've learned from stereotyping is that we've looked at a particular tribe, a Plains Indian tribe, and affix that image to all American Indians, still to this day, all American Indians. So it's just an incredible thing, I believe. So that's a huge stereotype, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And there's other stereotypes that we look at when we look at American Indians. Again, that whole stoic, like, come west, manifest destiny. Yes, you come and trample on our lands, and we'll be quiet about it. We'll be brave about it. You can steal and pillage and take whatever you want. And we're okay, because there's so much here. Even though it was ours, you can have it. And then another stereotype is the savage, which still is portrayed in all sorts of images, and certainly the older children's books and other books and movies. Oh my gosh, I grew up with cowboys and Indians because I'm that old. And the Indians were always bad. And then we have that American Indians, they no longer exist. They're a vanishing race. They're not here anymore. They just aren't part of our culture, which supports the living fossils trapped in time, trapped in their full gear. Excuse me. Get out of here. Decline. And that's how we view American Indians. And for reals, if you asked a classroom full of elementary school kids, I don't care where, you could say, where do Indians, what kind of house do Indians live in? And they're going to give you that whole teepee thing. They are. So we've trapped them in time. We don't have them in any contemporary setting. And so what that does is objectify them and make them exotic and crazy, right? And just, So again, we did it with children's books. The first picture books with Indians in them were like, boom, negative, perpetuating stereotypes, not a pretty picture whatsoever. And even in more contemporary books that have been made into movies, what was it? The Indian in the cupboard, still like that was a little boy's toy. So we're talking about diminishing this whole culture, these whole cultures into playthings for the dominant culture and portraying them as just like idiots, and that we're going to help save them and make them better people by knocking the Indian out of them, right? And it shows in a lot of children's books. And these children's books, again, are still in the hands of children. I mean, I did an assignment in this class when all these students went to the library and grabbed a book about American Indians. And we have so many old books in the library. We really do. In the college library that continues to perpetuate tons of stereotypes. Nobody's in contemporary clothing. I mean, there's books, and I'm going to share a few with you, but no, what's going on? And then just important things that the stereotyping, like Buffalo Bill did, that all American Indians wear feathers. And they don't all wear feathers, but that's what we look at. We draw an American Indian, that's what we're going to get. And feathers are very symbolic and spiritual and important in so many tribes. And there's rules and reasons as to when you are able to have the honor of wearing feathers. Doesn't show up in children's books. Doesn't show up. Then, of course, step aside from children's books and think of what we've done to whole cultures and how we've objectified them and diminished them, right? And so the idea of authentic culture, who gets to tell the stories? This guy's really popular, and he's a beautiful writer and a beautiful illustrator, Tommy DePaula. But does he have a right to tell some of these stories? And authentic people say no, that you don't have a right. You made a mess of this. You made a mess of this story, a very popular story that's in every classroom in the 4th grade, popular, but you made a mess. Not okay. Advocate taking this book right off the shelf because it misrepresents. Does he have an insider perspective? No. Are we using this book all over the place? Yes. Another example. This is a famous speech supposedly attributed to, Chief Seattle. So Chief Seattle is from the Duwamish tribe in the Seattle area. So again, we have this Wild West Buffalo Bill stereotype of using the Lakota Plains natives to illustrate this book. That's not Chief Seattle. He didn't wear feathers. He's a Duwamish native from the Northwest. This is part of the book, beautifully illustrated. The Duwamish didn't have horses. They used canoes. Is this book still in libraries and bookstores? Yeah, it is. There's Chief Seattle. No, there's Chief Seattle. Author, illustrator, insider perspective? No, it shouldn't be used. Caldecott award-winning book about Arrow to the Sun. It was a Pueblo Indian tale. So, okay, well, good. We're getting tribe-specific, right? But they say no. I have harsh words for the author. That dance that happens at the end of the story, the dance of life, he made that up. No, Pueblo does that. He made up that dance. For Pueblo Indians, dance is prayer. The not Pueblo Indian Gerald McDermott made up a prayer and is passing it off as a Pueblo prayer. Whew, I think that's pretty messed up. Insider perspective? No. So the deal is, with a lot of American Indian children's literature, we don't have the insider perspective. And does that mean that we should prevent non-natives from writing books? That's problematic because, again, there are a million tribes. There's a lot of repression that has transpired in the American Indian culture, as just briefly reflected in my white curated, lecture here. And the problem is that the printing presses for American Indian children's books are few and far between. We don't have that power. The representation is not there. So we're saying, yeah, we have to use outside sources, but they need to be authentic. They need to really look at the history. And again, unfortunately, the history is written through white eyes, right? So it's a conundrum. It's a problem. Powwows coming. Lyndon Boyden. Loved it because it had current American Indians in it, but it wasn't tribe specific. So it's not okay. So she's doing a better job with it, but is it exemplary? No, it's not. Is it a keeper? No, I don't think so. We're getting better. We're getting tribe specific. We need to. Oh, Savage Thunder. Noops. This isn't one. Oops. But I just had to throw it in there because guess what? Talking about objectifying a whole culture. We have done it. Just Google Native American. Sexy Native American. See what you come up with. Victoria Secrets did a huge God, they're so skinny. Did a huge fashion show, and it was a while ago, but it's still very significant. So, dear Victoria's Secret, did you know that if all of your 63 outfits had been worn by American Indian women, 21 of those women will have been raped at some point in their life. And 18 of those 21 rapes would have been perpetuated by non-native men. Crazy? So, objectification in every sense of the world. 1 in 3 Native American women are victims of sexual assault. I mean, I was digging around like about 2 semesters ago, digging up stuff to share about this whole thing, and I came across this free download. Native American Women's Health Education. What to do when you're raped. An ABC handbook for Native girls. That's there. And there's a reason it's there. Okay, I got to put this one in because it's crazy. Let's objectify a little bit more. Mascots. American Indian mascots. We're supposed to not have them around, but we have them around. Up front and close. Okay, you're going to say, yeah, the Washington Redskins, oh yeah, they changed their name. Well, how honorable. They only did it because of abject pressure. They only did it when FedEx said, "Hey, no, we're not gonna sponsor you anymore." That was just a couple of years ago, right? Like 1 year ago. Nike and Pepsi said, "Nah, we're not gonna either." So it was all about money. So that's honorable, right? That's their new helmet. Better, but it's still all over the place. There's still a million. That's an exaggeration, but tons of high school teams, college teams, and national teams. That's a hockey team, right? You wouldn't do this. Use the really bad racist words for these teams. Fill it in. Yeah, there's an American Indian for you. Oh, there's one too, right? Native children could not possibly look at a stadium full of thousands of people mocking their ethnicity and making fun of their traditions and feeling good about being Indian. This is from a blog. They glorify all the stupid old stereotypes and steal the pride our children could have in the beauty of their race. They insult the entire Indian race. Yeah, that's a good definition of racism, right? One more example. Land O'Lakes butter. It's been around forever. Recently changed because we're getting a little better. But when they changed it, do you think they mentioned one reason about, yeah, we're going to take that racist stereotyped American Indian off of our butter boxes and talk about how they're farmer owned. Didn't talk about why they did it. So go jump in a lake, Land O'Lakes. Same message. Same quote. Better books now. Tribe specific. It's what we want. It's what all children deserve. That whole windows and mirrors thing, right? There's my Salish sea that I live right next to. So it's getting better. It needs to get a lot better. Look at this short video about the term redskin and see the oppression there. Moving on. We're moving on.